أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, we're actually early as far as the timing is concerned, so let me begin with a mas'ala about fasting before I go to the tafseer. One of the important issues about fasting is the issue of niyat. And in niyat, there are two things I wanted to mention. One is that niyat by definition means the intention, the intent that you have in your mind and your heart. So it's not something which has to be said in words. Yes, when we are young, when we cannot understand the concept of niyat, we are told that when you stand up for namaz, you have to say, I'm doing 3 rakat namaz maghrib wajib qurbatan ilallah. The reason why we are told to say that is because as children we cannot comprehend the concept of niyat. But then, as I said many times, that it seems that nobody tells us when they grow up that you don't have to really say it, because intention is intention. As long as you know what you are doing, that is the niyat by itself. So when it comes to the month of Ramadan, people say, Maulana, how do I do the niyat? Do you have to say in the first eve of the first of Ramadan that I'm doing the niyat, that I'm going to fast for the whole month? Or do I do it as at the Sahri time before Fajr for every day? No, you don't really have to say anything. The main thing, especially for the month of Ramadan, there is a difference in fasting in Ramadan and off Ramadan. When you are, let's say, in the month of Rajab, you need to have this clear in your mind. Is this qaza? Is this nazar? Or is this sunnat? But when it comes to the month of Ramadan, if you are baligh, it is wajib on you to fast anyway. So you don't even have to identify then that I'm doing this fast of the 8th of Ramadan, wajib qurban ilallah. You don't even have to identify the day because it is month of Ramadan, it is wajib. And so you have to keep in mind that niyat doesn't mean necessarily, to say that in so many words. The second thing is that one of the conditions for the validity of fast is that your niyat should continue. There should be no interruption in the niyat from Fajr to Maghrib. Now what does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to constantly say, I'm fasting, I'm fasting, I'm fasting, and if you stop there, this is where if you believe that niyat means it has to be verbally mentioned. No. Continuity of the niyat means that in between that day, your intention should not change. It's 5 in the evening, maybe you didn't eat sahri, you're very, hungry, and you smell this food being cooked from the kitchen, and you get up and you go all the way there and I'll break the fast today. Well, if you do that intention of breaking the fast, your niyat has been interrupted. And if that happens, even if you don't eat after that, because the niyat did not continue all the way till the Maghrib time, your roza becomes batil. So keep in mind that the niyat has to be uninterrupted all the way to the Fajr time. However, in that case, if you don't eat, but you already broken the continuity of the niyat, then you just have to do qaza. There is no kafara for that. Okay, so keep these two issues in mind. Salawat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We'll continue with the surah, the Tafseer of Surah Jathiya. This is surah number 45. The ayat that we have looked till now are the ayat in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about the concept of Tawheed, His existence, His power and glory, through the window of the nature, within us and outside us. And we also saw the ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are people who see all the signs of my existence and power and glory, but they are still ungrateful. They ignore it, they ridicule it, they do not accept it. Now we go on to this ayat number 16 and 17, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Bani Israel. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحُكْمَ وَالنُّبُوَّةَ وَرَزَقْنَاهُم مِّنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ بَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْرِ فَمَا اخْتَلَفُوا إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُمْ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ يَقْضِي بَيْنَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فِيمَا كَانُوا فِيهِ يَخْتَلِفُونَ. This is the night where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about Bani Israel, that we certainly gave to the children of Israel the book, the judgment, the nubuwwat. We provided them with all the good things, and we preferred them over all the nations. And we gave them manifest command, but they did not differ among themselves, except after knowledge had come to them out of envy among themselves. And indeed your Lord will judge between them on the day of judgment concerning issues in which they differed with one another. Now, what is the connection of this two ayats with the theme before? It could be that the theme has completely changed, but no, there is a continuity there. And the continuity is that in the previous section, where Allah talked about the people who look at the signs that Allah has shown for them, but still ignore it, still reject it, and they are being ungrateful. One of the examples now Allah mentions is the example of Bani Israel. So this ayat is in a way connected to the theme before it. And the way Allah describes it says, لَقَدْ آتَيْنَا, we gave to them Al-Kitab. Number one, we revealed the Torah to them, which had all the guidance for them, what is halal, what is haram. And Torah was actually the book of law. And even when Isa alayhi salam came, he did not come to cancel the Sharia of Musa alayhi salam. He actually came to reform the corruption which had come in Bani Israel. So Injil was not supposed to replace Torah. Injil would have continued alongside Torah as the laws. Even now, if you look at the Bible, the New Testament, although we do not believe that the New Testament is Injil, because Injil was a book revealed by Allah on Isa alayhi salam, and the New Testament in Bible is, it consists of Gospels written by individuals known as Luke, Matthew, John, and one more fellow. And so if you look at there are still some statements which actually confirm our belief. For example, in one of those Gospels, Isa alayhi salam says that I have not come to change even an iota from the law. The law refers to the Torah. So Isa alayhi salam did not come to change the laws which were there in the Torah, just to modify the corruption which had taken place in that community. So the first blessing that Allah counts that is given to Bani Israel is Torah. Number two, wal hukma. Hukum is translated in two different ways: judgment as well as power. Even if you take it as being hakim, or means being a qazi and a judge, you cannot be a judge if you do not have power to make judgment in society. And so Allah is saying we even gave them power. We know that Bani Israel, they were in Egypt, and they were treated by Fir'aun and the people of Fir'aun as slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Musa delivered them, and they became independent, and they had their own power in what is known as the Holy Land. Then Allah mentions one nubuwwah. that I also blessed Bani Israel with nubuwwat. We have different ahadith giving the numbers of Anbiya of Bani Israel from 1,000 to 4,000. وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ, and Allah says we have blessed them with the good things. Besides the normal blessings that Allah had given to them, which He has given to almost all nations, there were special blessings that He gave to Bani Israel. Even the miracles which happened when they were being delivered from Fir'aun and becoming free there, they were not only witness of the miracle of the parting of the sea, they were part of that process. And they went to the other side. When they ran out of water, they asked Musa to, bring water by miracle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa just to use his asa, hit on the ground, and you will have this the spring come there, flowing. But they were so, what we call, in Urdu and even in Gujarati, we call them nakhra. There were 12 tribes, and they said each one of us wants to have it their own, spring, separate. And Allah even allowed them that. Then they ran out of the food that they have taken with themselves. And so Musa was asked to bring food by miracle, manna and salwa, as Qur'an mentions, it came down. And then they got tired, they wanted variety in their menu. So they told Musa, ask Allah to give us, not every day same thing. And Allah, just listens to their demands and accepts it because of Musa alayhi salam. So they had seen everything. Not only that, Allah at the end says, وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. We preferred them, we excelled them, gave them higher status over the nations of their time. During that time of Musa alayhi salam, when the nubuwwat of Musa was there, Bani Israel were considered to be the afdal of all the ummah at that time. And then, of course, وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ بَيِّنَاتٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we gave them the command which came in a very bayyin, in clear form. So these are all the blessings that Allah counts in ayat number 16 and the earlier wordings from ayat 17. But then what happened? They became ungrateful, started having problems among themselves. Even now you see there are four groups among them. And the way they differ from one another is on extremes. I just thought that only among in the Muslim world we have this problem of Wahhabis giving the label of kafir to the Shias. But I saw that this is there even in the Jewish community. In our old location in Bayview, we had a synagogue which belonged to the Reform Judaism, which is the most liberal group of the Jewish people. Now, behind Bathurst, there is a building there, which is a boarding school of the Jewish people, and that's run by the Orthodox, people, the conservative. And there was a situation where this is more than 8 years ago. We had problems with getting the service for the 9,000 Bathurst land. And the president of that center was also the one who was developer of the land south of our property in Bathurst. Eventually, the Vaughan city put its own pressure to facilitate that service for us through them. And as a way of, creating better relationships, they asked them to invite us for lunch. So we went to this Jewish boarding school. There I was sitting with the rabbi talking at the lunch, and I mentioned, just as a point of, interest, that our mosque had a synagogue next door there. We are moving to this new place, and we have a synagogue, the Jewish school here. And he said, no, that they are not referring to the Jewish synagogue, the Reformed, Judaism. He said they are not like us. Actually, the word he used was almost like, that's where I realized. I remember the Wahhabis saying to the Shias that these are not Muslims and they are kafir. So that there is problems within them also, and this is what Allah says, that they did not differ among themselves except after the knowledge had come to them, out of envy among themselves. There's one more point here. Some of the Mufassirin say that it also refers to the issue that they differed when they found out about the Prophet of Islam. When the Prophet migrated from Mecca to Medina, he found a very sizable Jewish community there, minority, but a big minority. And the question is always there, what were these people doing in Medina, away from their main Jewish land in Palestine? And this is where you come to realize that in their books, the predictions that they had about the last prophet were so precise. They also knew where he will come and settle down and make his headquarters. And they identified Yathrib as that place. And that's where they had come to settle down, waiting for the last prophet to come. But what happened was, when the last prophet came, he was not from among them. They were thinking it will be one of us. But when they found out he's an Arab, Qurayshi, Hashimi, this is where they started opposing him. And so one of the issues is that they started to differ among themselves in rejecting the Prophet or accepting him after the knowledge had come to them, and they did it out of jealousy towards the Prophet and his people. Of course, the ayat ends by saying that Allah will judge about them on the day of Qiyamah. And of course, the judgment is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me take this opportunity, as I had mentioned yesterday, that since this ayat is talking about the issue of Bani Israel, and the month of Ramadan is there, the last Friday has been declared by Ayatollah Khomeini during his days as the day of Quds, the day to remember the plight and the problems of the Palestinians. So I thought maybe, it's especially looking at this upcoming situation in the United Nations. We don't know what's going to happen, and even the role of our own government of Canada. It's important to look at this issue, and so I thought maybe I'll briefly look at this situation of Palestine at the present time. Salawat. First of all, let me talk about the relationship between the Muslims and the Jews historically. You have to realize that the first agreement signed by the Prophet as the head of the community was in Medina, and that was with the Jewish community. Because this is where in Mecca the Prophet was not in power. He came to Medina, he realized that the people of Medina, most of them have accepted Islam, but there is a minority of the Jewish people. And so he actually proposed to them that since we are now citizens of the same city, we need to have certain agreement and understanding so that we can have peaceful coexistence. And that's where the first covenant was charted and signed by the Prophet with the Jewish community, guaranteeing their right to their places of worship, respecting their property, and also the agreement that if we are ever attacked by outsider forces, we will together defend the city of Medina. And that's where we see later on in history that the Jewish community in Medina betrayed that trust and that agreement to the extent in the Battle of Khandaq, it became very difficult situation. There was danger from within because of this community. And that's where the Prophet decided to, as a result of their betrayal, to ask them to leave the city of Medina because the city was not secure because of their presence. And then, they conspired with the Quraysh, and the issue of Khaybar comes in, and that's where the relationships were not good during the latter part of the Prophet's life. On a theological level and on the level of Islamic jurisprudence and laws, Islam has recognized the Jewish people as Ahlul Kitab. And under Islamic rule, they will be considered to be dhimmi, which means they have certain rights that a Muslim government would have to respect, especially respect their places of worship and protect them. Till 19th century, if you compare the history of the Jewish people, because they were never in power, they were in power a long, long time ago, before Islam, and then the Romans came and destroyed them. So they were never in power during the time when Islam came to the scene on the world. Till 19th century, the Jewish people in Muslim lands lived more comfortably and more securely and more safely than compared to the Jewish people who lived under Christians, whether in the Middle East or in Europe. To the extent that if you look at the Jewish philosophy and even their literature, actually the Jewish philosophy and literature flourished in Spain during the Muslim rule. Not in Spain before Muslims and neither after Muslims. It was during the Muslim rules that the Jewish community got more, freedom to develop themselves from within, and that's the time where you see that the Jewish philosophers actually came up, and they are the people who are even referred to now by that community. So this is as far as the historical relationship of Muslims with the Yahud is concerned. But then what happened? In the last 100 years, we have problems. And the problem is because of this land known as Palestine in the Middle East. It's not a religious issue. It's not because we have problems. We have considered them to be Ahlul Kitab. We have given them that recognition. They are dhimmi under Muslim rule. But the problems start when we look at this land in Palestine. And before that, the Jewish people really didn't have equal status in Europe. It's only after the Enlightenment in Europe, liberal movements in Europe, where even the political system started changing, that they started considering their Jewish citizens to be equal to some extent, at least on the paper. This is where we see some of the Jewish leaders and Jewish people all across centuries had this religious dream of a Jewish state established by the Messiah when he comes before the end of time. But a group of Jewish leaders, especially in 18th and 19th century Europe, they transformed that religious dream into a political movement known as Zionism, where they said we don't have to wait for the Messiah to come and establish a Jewish state in Palestine. We can actually do it ourselves. And this is where this concept of Zionism started. In the First World War, Britain, France, Russia allied against Germany. On the other side, you had the Ottoman Empire, covering almost all Arab Middle East and the Northern Africa. And the Ottoman Empire sided with Germany. So there was already a problem there. This is where the British come in. Shaitan Akbar, actually, the father of Shaitan Akbar is British. All this fitna around the world is because of them. Britain, France, and Russia were together in fighting against Germany. United States of America had not yet joined in the Allied forces. So on one hand, what Britain does, they approach the Arab leaders. Now remember, Ottoman Empire, the Khalifa is a Turkish person. And the government is run by the Turkish Muslims. There was already tension within the Ottoman Empire between the Arabs and the Turks. Nationalism was starting gradually among the Arabs. They were saying that, why should the Turks rule over us? Even though the Khalifa, the king, was considered to be a Khalifa by them. And the British actually exploited the sentiments of the Arabs. They started their contacts with the Arab leaders. And they said, you know, if you side with us and oppose your own leaders, your own Khalifa, and your own empire, we will guarantee the independence of the entire Arab world. And not only that, you know, and in those days, who was considered to be the leader of the Arabs? The governor of the Ottoman Caliph in Mecca. And they were mostly from Sadat. And so the title of the governor of Mecca was always the Sharif of Mecca. The word Sharif in Arabic among the Sunnis means Sayyid. Those of you who know Swahili, even in Swahili, Sayyid is known as Sharifu. And it comes from the Arabic usage among the Sunnis. So the Sharif of Mecca was the governor there. And the British basically approached him. And his name was Hussein bin Ali. These are from the Sadat. Of course, they were Sunni. And they basically put this idea in his mind that even your prophet says, Al-a'immatu min Quraysh. The Khulafa will be from Quraysh. This Turkish guy, how can he be the Khalifa? You know, so they started building in this idea in his mind that, you know, Khilafat belongs to you, you know, and this is where they created more rift between the Arabs and the Turks, Muslim within the Ottoman Empire. Sharif Hussein bin Ali, he, just to relate to the current times, he would be the great grandfather of the present king of Jordan. These are descendants of the Sharif of Mecca. We'll come to that later on. So basically, they signed a pact and an agreement with him that if the Arabs, you know, rebel against their own government and support the Allied forces against Germany and against the Ottoman Empire, we guarantee the independence of the entire Arab world. Now, those days, Arab world meant Palestine, Syria and Iraq and Hijaz. Hijaz was the province where the Sharif was the governor there. And Syria, when we talk about Syria, remember, till the first war, Syria didn't mean just this Syria of the present day. It meant the greater Syria, which included Palestine, Lebanon, parts of Jordan, and present Syria. This was all known as Syria. As I remember in my research on this issue, I even made a copy of a document. The consulate of the United States of America in Jerusalem, one of their reports was sent to Washington, and that was published in a book by itself. What is interesting for me was the letterhead. It said the consulate of the United States of America, Jerusalem, Syria. So before the first war, Jerusalem was considered to be part of Syria. So Syria, Iraq, and Hijaz, these were the al-Bilad al-Arabiya. And Hussein bin Ali was considered now to be the leader of the Arabs of these areas. And so this is on one hand, British signing an agreement with the Arabs. On the other hand, Britain basically wanted the United States to join the Allied forces. And they knew that the Zionist lobby in Washington had great impact on the government there. And so they wanted to appease the Zionist lobby in order to get their support to pressurize the U.S. to become part of the Allied forces. And to do that, British government publicly announced its support for the Zionist agenda of a homeland in Palestine. They were very careful in selecting the word. They say, we're not talking about a political entity, we're talking about a homeland. As if it's a refugee camp or something like that. And this is where we saw on the 8th of November, 1917, the Balfour Declaration was, publicly announced. And this is the wording. This is a very important document in understanding the present history of Palestine. Look at the wording. It says, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of the object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. This nation has been mentioned by its name. But those who are already living there for centuries, see how they have been mentioned. Non-Jewish communities. Do not they have a name? What about Palestinian? What about Arab? Don't they have a culture? Don't they have a language? And this is where you see already the bias is starting, and this is 1917. And then what happened? The Arabs helped their allied forces, forced the retreat of the Ottoman army from the Arab land, which is Hijaz, Syria, and Iraq. And what did the British do? They told Hussein bin Ali, Sharif Hussein bin Ali, they said, we promised you, so you will be the king of Hijaz. We didn't promise you Syria and Iraq. And, there was no, the words were very clear that it is Bilad al-Arabiya. And so they divided this according to the mandates given to Britain for Palestine and Iraq, and to France for Syria. Now see, when they are talking about the numbers there, they are saying Jewish community and non-Jewish community. In 1917, the Jews owned 2.5% of the land. The rest was by the Palestinian Arabs. In 1947, the Jewish portion of the ownership of the land has gone 56%. And the Arabs are now 44%. I will say one thing here before we go back to this one. Let us look at this role of this fellow, Hussein bin Ali. He had a son by the name of Faisal, another son by the name of Abdullah. And when they realized that they have been betrayed, Abdullah was the more aggressive kind. He took the Bedouin forces, occupied the area known as Jordan now. And so Jordan, and then you have this King Abdullah, the son of Hussein bin Ali. And the British tolerated him. They said, this is just a desert area, they feel betrayed, we'll let them have this. And this is where you have the Jordan, then King Hussein then came after Abdullah, and then you have now Abdullah here, his son. His other son by the name of Faisal. When they realized Hussein bin Ali is very angry, they took his other son by the name of Faisal, and they said, okay, we'll make him the king of Syria. They took him to Damascus, installed him there, knowing well that Syria was given under the mandate of France and not Britain. So when France came in to take over the mandate and administration of Syria, they said, who are you? So Faisal's kingdom in Syria didn't last more than a year. So British now took him to Iraq and imposed him as the king of Iraq. And this is where it continued until his grandson, I think, King Farouk, who was overthrown by the coup, and that's where you have these other governments coming in. So British basically played its dirty game. And this family of Hussein bin Ali were with them. And so we shouldn't be surprised when we see the role of King Hussein, the previous king of Jordan, or even Abdullah now, towing the line of the United States of America or the Western forces. They have been basically from day one supported, and they have been created by the Allied forces. Going back to the situation in Palestine, The Arabs themselves also had, they are also responsible for this. The Zionists, even before the state of Israel was recognized by the UN, before the partition in 1947, they poured the money from Europe and United States of America to all these Jewish who were coming and settling in Palestine, giving them money to buy the land from the Arabs. There were unfortunately many landowners owners there who willingly sold their own land. So it's not only them, I think even the Muslim and Arabs and Palestinians also, share the blame and the problem for the tragedy. Then we see by 1948, you have Israel there, 78%, and the Arabs only 22%. And so this is where we see that, to look at 1995, Palestinian 10% of the land, Israel 90%. And what has happened is because the way the Arabs were cheated, of course they also share the blame for being cheated. You should have been more careful about what's being done to you. Let me conclude here with a statement from a professor who was the head of the history department in Simon Fraser University, where I did my master's under him. He passed away a few years ago. He has a book called Modern Middle East. And he has captured the entire tragedy in one sentence. A small territory that had been inhabited by an Arab majority for some 1200 years was promised by a third party, Britain, as a national home to another party, the international Jewish community, the majority of whom lived in Eastern Europe. So it was a land belonged to one people, taken by another and given to a third. And that is the root of the problem. The reason why I'm giving you this quote is not to say, these days we have this problem. Anything you talk about Israel becomes anti-Semite. No, these are the words of a Canadian professor, head of the Department of History at Simon Fraser University. And the book where he wrote this is actually a book used as a textbook for undergrad students when they study modern Middle East. So this is the reality. As far as the academia is concerned, they know that the haqq and the truth lies with the Palestinian Arabs. And, we can talk about peace, but peace must be based on justice. If you don't have justice, you can never have long-lasting peace in that region. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, create this sense of unity, because if you look at the ayat there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about Bani Israel, He says that one of the complaints that Allah has with them is that they started having quarrels within themselves. And that's the same problem that the Muslim Ummah is going through. If we have the resources, we have the money, we have the number, we also have education. It's not that, interestingly, in the Arab world, the highly educated community come from Palestine. Probably because they are suppressed, they are more into these issues of, going and studying than the Arabs in Saudi Arabia or Dubai or other places. And this is where we have to realize that the Muslims themselves first they have to unite, and then only they can tackle this problem which has created fitna all around in the Middle East for the last 100 years. Salawat Akbar. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.